So UFC 303 just headlined what was International Fight Week for 2024, and in this video I'm going to talk about every single fight that happened on the card, give my reaction to the fight, talk about what happened in the fight, and then give my thoughts on most of the fights on what I think should happen next for the fighters. Overall, I feel like the card was okay. Like, it wasn't amazing, but I feel like the prelims were pretty good. The main event was very good. The main card was pretty underwhelming. But overall, I feel like the card was decent. You know, like, there were some very, very standout performances. But with those standout performances come some pretty poor performances as well at the same time. And of course, we will get into that when we do get into the individual fights as I talk about them. Now, a lot of you guys have actually been asking me to do this for every single card that does happen, and to be honest with you, I would, but the problem is I actually don't get to watch every single card live, because I do compete in a sport which has all of its tournaments on Sunday, and the cards for me in New Zealand take place on Sunday, which is a very good time for me to watch them, but just unfortunately I don't catch them all live. But of course, I did catch this one live. It is UFC 303. How could you miss it? And let's talk about the first fight of the night as it did happen. Ricky Simón lost to Vinicius Oliveira in what was, in my opinion, a pretty bad performance for Simón. Simón didn't really get any wrestling going whatsoever, and I do understand that he is not a guy that has a good takedown accuracy. I think, like, over his last few fights, it's been 24%, which is very poor. But even in this fight, I felt like he wasn't willing to engage. Like, I feel like even in this fight, he didn't try to wrestle like he usually does. He didn't really attempt that many takedowns, and when he did, Oliveira showed incredible takedown defense. But it almost seemed like his plan was to fight from the outside with Oliveira, who, I will admit, isn't the most technical striker in the world, but he is very difficult for any striker in general, or just anyone in general, to deal with, because he doesn't fight in like a normal sort of striking way. He doesn't really have the best technique, but what he does do is throw strikes from incredibly awkward angles. Most of the strikes that he throws are from awkward angles, like massive hooks from the crowd, uppercuts from the floor. I mean, doesn't really throw that many straight shots, but when he does, they do land pretty hard. And he throws a lot of head kicks as well. It's just a very, very difficult striker to deal with. And Simón just had a bad game plan to deal with him. I'll be honest with you, just didn't really wrestle, couldn't get the takedowns going, couldn't really land anything on Oliveira either. But to be fair, every now and then he would land a big shot, but it was just kind of Oliveira's performance, really. Now, he didn't get the finish like he typically does, but he looked good, man, and I would really like to see him fight a striker next. I'd like to see how he deals with a striker, and I'm kind of thinking like Chris Gutierrez sort of style. Like, I understand that Gutierrez is very high up in the rankings, but Ricky Simón just not that long ago fought against Song Yadong, so that's a good win. That's a big win for Oliver. I'd like to see him tested again. Ray Saruya went out there against Carlos Hernandez and won the first 2 rounds, and what was a decent performance. Now, I did say going into the fight that I wasn't that confident in Ray Saruya, just because Carlos Hernandez, I think, is quite good, and Ray Saruya, I think he does have some flaws. Now, of course, the commentary did bring up his wrestling credentials. In Greco-Roman wrestling, he is a junior Olympian with a silver medalist, actually, in the Junior Olympics, which is incredible, and he has also competed in the World Championships as well in wrestling. Now, he's 22 years old, he's going to have a lot of time to develop, but against Carlos Hernandez, I did think that he looked incredible, especially in round number 2. The funny thing is about Ray Saruya is that although he does have this insane wrestling background, kind of like a Rinya Nakamura, I wouldn't actually really say that wrestling is his strength. I'd actually say his strength is in the pure grappling. I mean, his jiu-jitsu is wicked. The fact that the twister is his go-to submission is crazy, and I'd love to see him try and lock one of those up, which is actually why I'd really like to see him fight a striker in the next fight, because it'd be so interesting to see him fight and try and lock up that twister. But overall, just a really wicked grappler, a very aggressive grappler as well, very much a risk taker on the ground, and I do really like to see him fight. Of course, he had Shinsuke Nakamura in his corner, and he actually walked out to Lil Uzi Vert's song, Nakamura, which was kind of cool, because I thought he was just going to walk out to the theme song, and all of a sudden, Lil Uzi Vert starts playing, and I'm like, that's pretty awesome, you know. And yeah, at the end as well, I think he did Shinsuke Nakamura's pose. I'm not actually going to do it because I don't know what it is. That's something to do with the hands. And yeah, that post went viral on Twitter. So I don't know if there were a lot of Japanese fans watching that liked that post, or if there were a lot of WWE fans that liked the post, but yeah, I'm happy for Rei Saruya. I mean, this guy's 22 years old. He's like 3 weeks older than me, and he's in the UFC, and I'm sitting in my bedroom talking about the UFC. So that's cool, isn't it? Anyway, Rei Saruya, I'd like to see him fight probably on the fight card that Kai Asakura debuts on. I think that would be good timing, or the card that Tatsuro Taira fights on next as well. So I think there's definitely options there for him in his next matchup. Now, Martin Budai fought against Andrei Arlovski. It wasn't a good fight, and I will admit to you guys, I was actually cooking my lunch during this fight because I knew it wasn't going to be a good one. So I didn't actually really watch this one with a lot of deep intent, but I did have it going on my phone. And Budai just kind of did what Budai does, and he slows the fight down, he clinches a lot, and it's just not that fun to watch. And the commentary even themselves was talking about how it just wasn't a good fight, was it? I didn't even see the whole fight. I actually missed half of it because I was cooking my lunch, but yeah, it just wasn't a good fight. We can move on to the next one between Jillian Robertson and Michelle Waterson-Gomez, which was a very good performance for Jillian Robertson, but unfortunately with that kind of came a very sad performance for Michelle Waterson-Gomez, because she did get dominated in the matchup. All of the judges scored all 3 rounds for Jillian Robertson, and one of them gave her a 10-8 round. It just was a domination for Robertson in the grappling. I thought she'd look really good. And just for Michelle Waterson-Gomez, it was just kind of like, man, that's sad. Like, that's her last fight, because she did retire, and she got a massive send-off. Like, you would almost think that Michelle Waterson-Gomez was like a former champion with the way that they sent her off with a massive retirement speech and such, where some fighters retire and they're just like, oh, see you later, you know? But yeah, that happened too. But I did kind of speculate that we're going to see Andrei Arlovski retire and Michelle Waterson-Gomez retire, and that didn't happen. So pretty interesting. Jillian Robertson wins. I'd like to see her fight again in the rankings, maybe against Luana Pinheiro. Peyton Talbot has the showcase performance that he was expected to have, except it only took 19 seconds. And if you rewatch the fight, Yanis Gamori does not move. Like, he doesn't move for the whole fight. Like, he kind of walks into the middle of the octagon. He doesn't move his head. He doesn't really move his body or his legs at all. And he's just like a punching bag for Peyton Talbot, who just lands the 1-2 clean on the chin. And Gamori goes down, and he gets finished off with ground and pound. That's the performance. For Peyton Talbot, I thought his post-fight interview was pretty good, even though DC, why are you so salty about it? Like, does DC secretly hate Peyton Talbot? I mean, the way that he was talking about him was odd, man. I'll be honest with you. But yeah, Talbot called out Adrian Yanez. I would absolutely love to see that fight, and I do think he's going to be a superstar, even though DC is trying to talk him down after the best performance of his career. Craziness. But I do think that Peyton Talbot will go on to do good things. I was going along the lines of the Yanez fight. I'd love to see Peyton Talbot fight Adrian Yanez in the Sophia at UFC 306, which is just looking like it's going to be a massive card, because there are multiple fighters that have been requesting to be on that card. I think UFC 306 is going to be one of the biggest cards of all time, it seems. And now that it's sponsored by Saudi Arabia, which is really random, I know. Now that it's sponsored by Saudi Arabia, it is going to have a lot of money backing it, and I think it's going to be a fantastic card that I cannot wait to see, and I would like to see Peyton Talbot on that Sophia. Now, Charles Jourdain lost to Gene Silva, didn't he? And I did pick Jourdain. It was just a really bad pick. Jourdain just didn't really look good. It was the first time Jourdain had actually ever been knocked out in a fight, so very impressive for Gene Silva to manage to do that with that very sneaky uppercut in the clinch, because when it happened, I was like, oh, what dropped him? And if you watch the replay, it was just a very sneaky little uppercut that Gene Silva did land in the clinch as they were exiting there, after Jourdain was kind of trying to get a takedown. But for Gene Silva, it was just the Gene Silva show. I'll be honest with you, I did think that Jourdain was going to be the more technical striker, and he was going to be able to mix in that wrestling and the grappling, and fighting nerds, man, this gym, I'm telling you, this is the gym to keep your eye out for, because Gene Silva, rapid improvements from his Contender Series fight to his debut against Weston Wilson, and now having a win over Charles Jourdain, who I understand a lot of people don't rate super highly, but Charles Jourdain is a very good fighter, do not get me wrong. And this gym is definitely a gym to look out for because they've got Carlos Prates in the gym. They've got Caio Braujo in the gym. Gene Silva now. Yaya Farias, who was on the Contender Series last year. Akaro Brito, who's going to be on the Contender Series week number 1. And that is perfect timing for me to talk about Contender Series week number 1. The full card was officially announced by the UFC 303 broadcast. And I will be talking about that card in probably the next couple of days. So if you want to see my predictions for week number 1 of the Contender Series, subscribe to my channel. That will be out very, very soon. And also Mauricio Ruffi is on the card as well, who is rumored to have a very big matchup coming out next, unless it has already been announced. It is not. There are rumors of Ruffi having a very big fight announced coming up soon because the UFC seems to believe in him quite a lot. Andre Fili lost. Sorry. No, he won. He won a decision he probably shouldn't have gotten, is kind of where I was going to go there. But I will admit as well, with this fight, I didn't really see the full fight because during this fight and just a little bit before was actually when I was being told that we were going to be getting a different co-main event. Of course, we ended up with Lopez versus Ige. I made a video on it. But I was being told as it was being worked on that Ortega was out of the fight and that Dan Ige was going to be stepping in on short notice. And of course, during that period of time, I was trying to verify with many different sources. And I actually told you guys in the We Want Picks Discord that that fight was going to happen well over an hour before it was announced. And you guys clowned me so hard for that. But you got to trust in me, man. Like, listen, I'm no idiot. People do tell me stuff, but the way that things work is if you are told any information whatsoever, never ever speak on it. You've got to be a very trustworthy kind of guy in this sort of thing. And I will admit, I told you guys in the Discord, and you guys clowned me so hard. So yeah, all good, it's what it is. But yeah, shout out to those sources that did confirm with me that Dan Ige was going to fight against Lopez. And because of that, and I was trying to really work on that, I was on my phone the whole time. I didn't really see the fight. From what I heard, Swanson won the second and the third round, according to a lot of people, and Philly just kind of scraped his way through. But the thing is with Andre Fili is if he lost that decision, my goodness, you would have heard about it online because he does complain about a lot of decisions all of the time. But I didn't see it because I was working on verifying the news of the co-main event that did happen. Now, Joe Pyfer did defeat Marc-Andre Barriol. Very good comeback performance for Joe Pyfer. I mean, he did kind of seem to be in control the whole fight. Marc-Andre Barriol is no bum at all. He is a guy that has turned away some pretty decent fighters in the past and is stylistically a pretty decent matchup for Pyfer, I will admit. But the fact that he was able to get it done with the hands is impressive to me because I felt like Pyfer would potentially have looked to wrestle in that matchup. But yeah, Pyfer, massive overhand, kind of as Barriol was retreating as well, so it didn't even really land with full power. And then after that, kind of swarms Barriol. And this is what Barriol does to other fighters. He swarms fighters against the cage, and he kind of rips a hook to the body, and he starts working up top, and eventually he lands a couple massive shots on the head of Barriol, and Barriol goes down face first, and that is not something that I don't think we've ever seen happen to Barriol at all. I don't think he's actually ever been knocked out like that. I mean, he's been knocked out twice in his career. The last time he was knocked out must have been before the UFC, unless I'm an idiot. I mean, Dolce Lung, Chidin Jakwani knocked him out in 16 seconds. I forgot. But aside from that, you don't see that happen to Marc-Andre. Pyfer looked good. Do you throw him back in there with someone highly ranked? I might just say no, but it is sad because I do feel like Pyfer kind of has lost a little bit of his hype. That's just what happens, you know. But yeah, I'd like to see him again. Maybe against a ranked opponent. Maybe Chris Curtis. I mean, what's Chris Curtis up to? That's a good fight. Now we can move on to the main card, and this is kind of where things did fall off just a little bit for me, really. Gary versus MVP. I mean, it's not really Gary's fault, in my opinion, because this is how MVP fights, very low volume. He doesn't really do anything, like, at all, except for land a very big overhand at one point. And, on the feet, MVP was controlling the matchup. Like, we had never really seen Gary outclassed like this on the feet before. And MVP was landing big shots against him in the first round. I think MVP won the first round. And in the second round, Gary got an early takedown by catching a kick, I believe it was. had the back of MVP, had the back standing of MVP, which happened in the third round as well. And then round 3 comes back around, and MVP lands some pretty good damaging shots on Ingari, but then Ingari spends the last minute of the fight on the back of MVP, and I guess that was enough to win the third round. But I mean, I'm very interested to hear what you guys' opinions are on this fight, because I kind of thought MVP won. Listen, I picked Ingari. I'm pretty happy that I got the pick correct, because I think that it was a pretty hard fight to predict, actually. But, like, do you give it to MVP? I thought maybe MVP won rounds 2 and 3. Let me know what you think in the comments below on that one. But I thought very underwhelming performance for Ingari. I think it's kind of the performance where I kind of look at Ingari now and I think, yeah, you can't beat Leon Edwards, you know. And I kind of look at the performance and I think, yeah, you can't beat Shavkat Rakhmonov. You know, you can't beat... I mean, Colby Covington might be able to beat Ingari, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, he's 26 years old. I think Ingari, next fight, have it on the Conor McGregor card for sure. But let's not rush him, you know what I mean? Let's not do Ingari versus Shavkat. Let's not do Ingari versus JDM. And another thing as well that I saw a lot of people doing on Twitter, because of course Ingari is now the villain, people don't like him. A lot of people were reflecting on Ingari's career, and it's like, man, like, has this guy had an exciting UFC fight? You know, he knocked out D-Rod, which is cool, but the fight against Neil Magny was a domination, but it wasn't amazing, and these last 2 fights are kind of like, eh. So yeah, I feel like Ingari still hyped up. I mean, he's 15-0 now. But yeah, it's Ingari. I feel like his stock dropped. We lost stock in Ingari here, you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, he was diving for the legs of a 37-year-old kickboxer who was well past his prime at this point. And did not want this fight at 170 pounds either. So, there's that. Now we can move on up to Macy Chiasson taking on Mayra Bueno Silva. It was okay, but the thing is, I will admit, when they announced week 1 of Contender Series, I started to watch tape on the week 1 fighters that I hadn't actually heard of yet, or had been confirmed of yet, so I didn't actually really watch the fight, to be honest with you. Apparently it was pretty good. It was stopped by a cut to Mayra Bueno Silva because of an elbow of Macy Chiasson, but yeah, it happened. I didn't watch it, just to be fully honest with you. I was watching tape on the Contender Series. Now, Roman Dolidze fought against... And what is it? Dude, this fight annoyed me so much because Anthony Smith looked so bad. He looked so bad, and he just beat Vitor Petrino. He made Roman Dolidze look like a good striker. Roman Dolidze is not a good striker, and the whole time Dolidze is outstriking Anthony Smith. You watch the fight in the first round, Anthony Smith is visibly hurting Roman Dolidze with the leg kicks. Visibly hurting him. Over and over again, and Dolidze is starting to actually slow down in the fight, and the second round comes around, and it's like, Anthony Smith, are you going to go back to the leg kicks? And guess what he does? He doesn't leg kick anymore. What are you doing, Anthony Smith? You were finding success in round number 1 with the leg kicks. He stopped doing it. He just stopped doing anything, really, and then Dolidze caught him, kind of, and he slipped over. And Smith had to cover up for a lot of period of time, and Dolidze definitely took the round number 2 because of all of that ground and pound and that flurry. And then we go into round number 3. Alright, Anthony Smith, it's time to go. You've hurt the legs of Roman Dolidze. He's taken this fight on short notice, upper weight class. He's going to be a little bit gassed out. Let's go, Smith. Let's do something. No urgency. No urgency. Anthony Smith, if you won this fight against Roman Dolidze, you would have been like 1 or 2 fights away from a title shot. And I know that sounds absolutely diabolical, but Anthony Smith and Alex Pereira do have beef, and you could sell a fight between Anthony Smith and Alex Pereira if he was to defeat Roman Dolidze and then potentially fight against Volkan Oezdemir or someone and get a win there, or even just trying to rebook the Olberg fight or something, and then you could kind of build a fight. But no, he just accepts defeat. How bad is Vitor Petrino? Okay, we'll move on to the co-main event. Co-main event. Diego Lopez takes on Dan Ige. Obviously, a very short notice fight. Of course, a fight which I tried to report before it happened to you guys in the Discord, but no one seemed to appreciate my reporting ability, but that's all good. I did pick Diego Lopez in that little short video. I did actually pick him to win by knockout, and quite a few takeaways from the fight. And I will admit, though, to be fully honest with you, Ige looked good. I feel like Lopez looked okay. He didn't look amazing, but he looked okay. And where do I even really start, to be honest with you? Because there's a lot to talk about. I love Diego Lopez. I love him. I really do. Not like that, but I love him as a fighter. He's one of my favorite fighters to watch. He's quickly become a lot of people's favorite fighters to watch because he's a fan favorite of a fighter. But I felt like he had a pretty underwhelming performance here, and I don't want people to take away from this fight against Dan Ige. Oh, Diego Lopez isn't as good as we thought he was, all this and that. To start with, Diego Lopez accepted this fight on very short notice. I believe 2 weeks notice, like Alex Pereira versus Yuri did. And secondly, he cut down to 145 pounds, or was preparing the cut, and then according to him was told at 4 in the morning that the fight was not going to be at 145, it was going to be at 155. So he didn't sleep well the night of the weight cut, so he waited in then, of course, at like the 155 for the Ortega fight. And then Ortega falls out, and they're like, oh, well, Dan Ige wants to fight you. You need to weigh in again. And I'll be honest with you guys, like maybe he didn't cut any weight, but 161 pounds? That seems pretty light for Lopez because he's a big boy. And it almost felt like he potentially had to cut weight again or done something, or maybe he just did a big poo before weighing in. I don't know. But yeah, 161 pounds. I mean, that's light for what I think Lopez actually weighs when he steps into the cage. But yeah, he goes in there again, 3 weight class changes, one opponent change, I should say, sorry, in 24 hours. And I thought to start the fight, all he does is throw hooks on the feet, and he clinches, he kind of gets engaged in the clinch and then dirty boxes and really relies on his power in those sort of sequences. And throws a lot of knees up the middle, a lot of uppercuts up the middle as well. But I'm really thinking, Diego Lopez, I'm watching him fight, I'm like, he's not as good as I thought he was. And it's really, really sad to say. And I do not want people in general, though, to kind of take away that Lopez is not a good fighter from that performance against Ige. But I feel like Ige didn't expose Lopez in any way whatsoever, but I think he kind of showed that Lopez is a little bit flawed in the striking technique, and Lopez is a much better grappler than he is a striker as well. I want to say that as well. And then he slowed down a lot in round number 3, but I think that heavily comes down to just the pace that he was putting on Ige, because with Lopez, he throws full power every single strike, and that is going to slow you down, throwing full power, of course. And he was kind of really trying to lock in some big submissions. I think he had a Das choke in at some point. I think he was trying to work for like a rear naked choke at some point as well. At a guillotine that he turned into the Das choke, sorry. Went for an armbar at the end of round number 2. And then in round number 3, he is tired. And I'm like, man, like, I really do not want to see Lopez lose this fight. No disrespect to Dan Ige, I'll get to him in a second. But I'm like, man, I don't want to see Lopez lose this fight because I'll be so heartbroken for him, because I picked him to beat the number 3 ranked Brian Ortega, you know what I mean? I'm like, he had 2 weight class changes, and if he loses this fight, people are going to say, oh, he's never been all that. I'm like, no, Diego, just hold on. And he does survive round number 3. But now to talk about Dan Ige. Accepted the fight hours before the fight, so a lot of respect to him. He woke up that morning not expecting to fight that day, which is crazy to think about, right? And then he goes in there against Lopez, and in the first round, Lopez is landing bombs on him, but he's staying composed. He shot a takedown around number 1, but it didn't really end up working, and then round number 2 comes around, and same sort of story, really, to be honest with you. Shoots a takedown, but kind of lands big shots on Lopez, better than round number 1, but Lopez once again lands some pretty big shots on him with his hooks. And then round number 3 comes along, and it's like Lopez is gassed, and you really put the pedal to the metal there, and I gotta respect him for doing that, because a lot of the time, more times than you'd like to see, fighters get in this situation where they're down 2 rounds, and they just accept defeat, like they just don't want to go out there and really try and like risk it all for a finish. And I guess the wording from the corner was, you've got nothing to lose, because at the end of the day, if Dan Ige loses to Diego Lopez like he did, he's not going to go down in the rankings. He's not going to lose stock. He gained stock the minute he stepped into that cage. So I do respect him for doing that. I respect Lopez for taking the fight as well. I mean, it was a tough fight for both. I'm assuming they're going to get like a fight of the night bonus or some sort. I think in general they're going to get a lot of money for accepting this fight. And yeah, just kind of in general, that's it really. To be honest with you, with that fight, I did kind of take away that Lopez's striking isn't as good as I thought it was, and I do kind of think like, man, you know, like Lopez. Yeah, I mean, he called out like Volkanovski to fight at UFC 306. There's another one as well to talk about UFC 306. Danige wants to be on UFC 306, so I think he does a rebook Chippy Mariscal versus Danige for that card because Danige was meant to fight Chippy in the end of July. I don't think that fight happens anymore. Let's just do Ige versus Chippy at the Sophia. And then Diego Lopez. I mean, he called out Alexander Volkanovski. I think he called out. Did he call out Yair or Ortega? Diego Lopez versus Movsar Evloev 2 at the Sophia. Come on, guys, let's do it, man. Movsar Evloev is such a salty dude. Always crying about Diego Lopez. Let's just settle it, man. Let's do the rematch. Diego Lopez versus Movsar Evloev 2 in the Sophia, UFC 306. I love it. Let's do it. Make it happen. Now to talk about the main event. I do have a separate video breaking it down a little bit more in depth. But to talk about the fight as it happened, Alex Pereira I thought looked really good. And I feel like Yuri Procházka changed his style on this matchup. You know, we didn't see the same sort of wild Yuri like we normally do. Normally Yuri's wild man in there. You know, he's got his hands super, super low. He's moving his head. He's moving his body. You know, he's running around the octagon like a madman. And it looked like he fought in like a much more, I guess, traditional sort of style. And maybe that was just because he was respecting Alex Pereira, or he was a little bit afraid potentially of the power coming back because he took a lot of damage versus Rakic. He got knocked out by Pereira in the first fight. You know, maybe he didn't want to have to deal with that again. And unfortunately, he gets knocked down at the end of the first. Alex catches him big at the start of the second. And it's not the first brutal knockout loss we've seen Yuri take. Man, he's been knocked out multiple times in his career now. Got slipped badly by Muhammad Lawal. Got slipped badly by Alex Pereira today. Hopefully his chin's still here, man. I do not want to see Yuri Procházka come back this year. I do not want to see him come back this year. He's only 31 years old. That's young for this weight class. He's got all the skills in the world. I want to see Yuri come back in 2025. As for Alex Pereira, it looks like he may have broken his toe on Yuri's face, which is nuts, but I'd like to see him. Honestly, I've never really been on the Ankalaev title shot camp because Ankalaev, he just annoys me, and he is 1-1-1 in his last 3. You know, like he hasn't really done anything really to deserve the title shot. But let's just do it. Let's get it out of the way. Thiago Santos was able to drop Ankalaev. I think Pereira would be able to do the same. So let's just do it. Let's get it out of the way, and let's make it happen. Yeah, happy for Alex, man. Sad for Yuri, but unfortunately one of the two had to lose, and they're both fan favorites. So, yeah, sad to see, but happy for Alex at the same time. Happy for Diego Lopez. Yeah, that's kind of it for the card, I'll be honest with you. The main card, aside from the main event, I think wasn't that great, but I think the card overall as a whole, pretty decent, pretty good, pretty okay. Quite a lot coming up with my channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, because I'm going to do UFC Denver predictions soon. I'm going to do Contender Series predictions soon, and there's no UFC on next weekend. There's no PFL, no Bellator, no nothing. So I'm going to do LFA predictions instead. So definitely stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in the next video.